Welcome back. Now we're up for web design, creating the web application. Inside of this virtual machine, our example server is running on port 80, and on my Mac, you can do the same thing on your Windows machine. I now have created a directory, XData live, it's empty, and I drag that into my Visual Studio Code so that we can do the web development now, the design with Visual Studio Code, because it's much easier for me, I think, or as a developer, to use any of the design tools or anything. I've done many videos on this, how I basically come to these, and that is something, I'll show from scratch once again how I work this out, and I hope you'll enjoy it to see how you can build these or assemble these Lego blocks inside your HTML. We won't add CSS. As CSS, we're going to use Bootstrap, so that's going to be a minor part in this tutorial. It's all going to be about web and the interaction with your backend. One thing I have to say, the virtual machine has a certain IP address. Of course, I'm going to hard code that when I call that from this application. That is something that we're going to go deeper into with the deployment, because then we have to figure out how does the web application communicate with the back end, and how does that work with regards to IP addresses, domain names, SSL certificates. But that is for another day. This is first for the development environment to get a running prototype. So we create two files. File number one is index.html. And yes, I want to create that here. And I'm just going to press exclamation mark. And I already have my structure of the document. I'm going to call it stock chart example. That's the title of my XML document. Prettier takes over, formats everything. And then we need another piece to the puzzle, which is the scripts.js, which is JavaScript. And we're not going to touch that at first. The only thing what we're going to do is here we have to add a couple of references. Interestingly, Copilot suggests Apex charts. Now I'm going to use Chart.js, and I'm going to copy those from the documentation. So with regards to Bootstrap, we have to use the Bootstrap CSS. That is right here. That's the link to it. I copied that from the documentation. And then for Chart.js, same thing, copied it from the documentation. And remember that this is actually JavaScript, this is CSS. And then we have to add our own script as well. That's the file right here that we reference, save. And then with regards to Bootstrap again, at the end of the file, before the closing body tag, we do this. We could also do defer and add it to the top. I still prefer it doing this way, because not all browsers are pretty happy with the defer tag. And then with regards to design, we're almost done already, because we have our Bootstrap in there. So we're not going to do any formatting. The only thing we need the structure of the document. And at first, we're just going to do a container P4. And in there, we're going to do a row. And inside of the row later on, that's where we're going to do our combo boxes to select things. But for now, we're just going to do something very simple. We're going to do a second row, dot row. And in there, we're going to place the chart. And we're going to do a col12, take the full width, and px3 on the left and on the right. I want to have a padding 2, and on the top I want to have a margin of 3. Perfect. And in there, and this is something you find from the documentation, Copilot has it figured out already, this is what we need. Inside we need a canvas tag, because the chart is rendered on a HTML canvas tag, and the ID is used to identify the chart. Okay, that's it. If we now go over here, let me close this. Let me start the browser as well. So we go to our index.html right here, click down here, go live. And to nobody's surprise, we get an empty page, right? There's nothing on it. Let me make it a little bit wider. so that we can see more as soon as there actually is something on the page. So right now, nothing is being drawn, nothing is being retrieved, and everything is white. So there's nothing visible on the page. So if we go to the scripts, and this might be, as we have the German proverb, Bohemian villages, or might seem like Chinese if you're not able to read Chinese glyphs to you, but just bear with me. You know, it's worth it, because that way you can understand the whole process and also how much easier TMS Web Core is. So we define a chart variable globally outside. So that is like the global scope in JavaScript. And we need, basically, first of all, we're going to say that we want to show the chart. And in order to show the chart, we need an async function. And that is going to be show chart. And no parameters, no nothing. I'm going to hard code everything for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do context is document get element by ID, and the ID is my chart in this case. And we have to basically look at the capitalization, very important. The C is capitalized, so my chart. So at this point, context points to the element. That is very similar to TMS Web Core. And now I'm going to basically create the URL. So const URL equals, and again, I'm going to hardcode this now. This is HTTP. No, it's not localhost. In this case, it's 192.168.0.58, I think. And then I added stock to the ending. Like if I look at my web service, it's localhost 80. Let's see, is it? Oh, sorry, it's localhost 80. So it's on port 80 inside of the virtual machine. So it is just 58. And then what do we add to it? And that's the biggie, right? Well, we know what we need to add to it. Like here, look, localhost, stock service, line chart. This is exactly what we want to do, like this. Copy, paste, and we copy it into our URL, like so. Only one. So we have here, this is the IP of my virtual machine. If it is the same machine, you keep localhost, and then line chart, symbol, everything's hard-coded, Apple, and year equals 0. Let's do a year 2024, for example. That's my URL. And that URL needs to be requested from my web service. So what I'm doing is going to say response is await. I'm going to fetch it from the URL. That's it. And then I'm going to interpret the response as JSON. This is exactly what I need to do. So const data equals await response.json. And now that I have the JSON, I can create my chart, but only, and this is like something why I did set it to null initially. If the chart is not equal to null, I need to destroy it first, like so. Because you can't render, or you can't create the same thing twice. And interestingly here, that Copilot already says like, okay, you want a new chart on the context, and this is how you would do what you want to do with the JSON data that you just retrieved. So it is pretty smart, Copilot. But this part here, after this object, we have that in data, and Copilot obviously doesn't realize that. So the only thing I need to do is chart is new chart, and then context, comma, data, because that's the data from XData from the web service. And this all matches, by the way, the Chart.js documentation. If we look at the documentation again in getting started, we just have here new chart, context, and then this object in there. See, context, my chart, new chart. That's all we have to do. Okay? And with that, nothing is visible still, right? Because we're not calling this, right? We're not calling show chart anyway. So what we can add is, we can say document.add event listener, and then DOM content loaded show chart. That means like as soon as everything from the web browser is loaded, we want to show the chart. Perfect. So we save, and now our page should update, but it does not. Something's not working. So we go in here, go into the developer console, and we get an error message that it's been blocked by course policy. Well, that is one of the biggest questions I get all the time when starting with XData. Why this isn't enabled by default to get users started, I don't know. So you have to go into your XData server, go to the server container, click on the server, double click on the server, and here, this is where you add middleware. See here, manage middleware list. And there is something that is called course, and that is for cross-browser basically security. What it means is you don't want everybody to access your XData server usually, right? You would limit it to your domain. So you would here in origin, you would put your domain that only that only web applications on your domain can access this server. So here I simply keep everything as it is. Or, for example, you can enter an asterisk, which means all the servers are allowed to do all the methods, okay? And with that, we start it, recompile it, start, and then we go back to our Visual Studio Code project into our browser, and let's refresh this, pressing enter. And now we get not found. So that is definitely a better response that we can work with. And what I forgot, if you look at the URL here, line chart, I forgot the stock service. So here I now have to say stock service. And then it says chart is not a constructor. So Holger here, I can see, again, Delphi would have found this, right? Because we are not working with a compiler. You know, I'm leaving this in intentionally. We don't have a compiler. So everything I type here is not getting checked by anything. And it's literally, you see the mistakes at runtime. So now, here we go. My console, it works. So now I can refresh. And there is my chart. Perfect. Huh? It's amazing what kind of results you get and how quickly you get them. So for prototyping and testing my XData server now, because I don't want these points here, right? Why would I want these? That's definitely something where I use these kind of solutions. But as soon as it becomes more complex, why would I work with something where I don't have a compiler, nothing is getting checked? That is rather risky. So now, flipping back to the XData server, because we want to get rid of these dots here, and we want to not, basically it's like, there is no curves. It's pretty steep. Everything is pretty steep. And I want it to be more round. And that's something that Chart.js can do for us as well. So going back at the server and not into the server container, everything is in the service controller. Now we need to change the configuration of our server. What we need to do in the dataset is we need to specify, in addition to the border width, we specify add pair. And there is a point style that we define just for this data set, and it's false. That means we don't have a point style. That means points are not being drawn. And then we also want a cubic interpolation mode. Wonderful. Cubic interpolation mode. And then we set that to default. And then L data set, add pair. And now the tension, I set that to, let's say 0.3, for example. The higher the number, the rounder everything gets. But you lose, of course, accuracy. So just don't go too hog wild with the tension value. It's a value between 0 and 1. So 0.3 is already pretty round, you know, inaccurate, as you could also say. Okay? And with that, we run the server again. We stop it here. And what you see now is the power. Like, you don't change your front end, and your users are now going to get a completely different chart by you just recompiling the server. So we go back to the browser. I don't even need to recompile anything. I just refresh the page, and the dots are gone, and everything is nice and round. If you don't like this, you take the tension out, you save it, and you recompile it. And then you start, and then here, And then it's like a normal, like something that looks like a heart rate or whatever, very, very steep inclines. The thing to remember here is you could also make this a parameter in your service, right? You could say, hey, do you want the tension, yes or no? And then you basically change the chart accordingly. You can add parameters inside of your web application to change the appearance of the chart. So that the XData server, instead of just requesting the symbol and the year, you could also have parameters for what do you want as a legend? Do you want a title? What is the title? These kind of things are all possible. And the XData server generates the data structure for you, including the data that you want. You could add a filter, not only for the years, you could say only, or you could also say multiple stock symbols. You could do also not only the closing value, you could also select the value that you want to show. The options that you have now are infinite. I just wanted to get you started. And of course, you're probably not going to do this kind of thing with stock values. You probably have your own database with your own statistics or own data that you want to present to the user in a web application. So this will get you started right away. And with that, we're not done yet, because I also want to point out something else. We start the chart at 160. That looks nice, and it can definitely be something that you want to show, if you just want to show the progress of the stock, for example, let's go into here. So we can change this to NVIDIA, for example. So NVDA, so the symbol is NV symbol equals NVDA, save, and then we get the chart for NVIDIA. And you see that here we have the low point of 40 and 140. So if you want to show something like that without having the values involved, you might not show the axes or the values at all. That might be something that you want. But in my case, I wanted to start at 0. And for that, once again, we have to change the server. We stop the server and we add additional information to the structure. We add options. And this is not easy to understand while watching a video without reproducing it afterwards. You will be like, oh yeah, I got it. It's easy. I can do that myself. Please try it yourself to create a JSON document like this by adding pairs and all that kind of stuff, because it is not as easy as it looks. I'm going to paste the code that we need to do in order to insert everything. So what we need to do is, I don't know why it is now added one level too high. What we need to do is we need to create the Y, and the begin at 0 has to be true right here. Y begin at 0 true. The problem is this is an object, this is an object, and this is an object. So you have cascading objects. So in order to get the Y, you say create a JSON object with a pair with Y, and that Y is another object with a pair of begin at 0 true. And the true here is like this. It's not a string. Otherwise in JSON it would be written like this. So you can't have the string. It has to be a Boolean value. And then here the scales, basically the outside here scales, is then once again tJSON object creates JSON pair create scales with the scales Y in there. Finally, we have to add that, of course, to our results. So we say add pair, and then we say options. That's the final pair, L scales. So we have the scales that we add to the options right here. And that's it. So we're done with that. We recompile, start, and once again, we open our web browser, we refresh the page. And there you go. The chart now starts at 0. And we still have NVIDIA, of course, because that's what we hard-coded in our source code right here. If we want to go back to Apple, AAPL, save, and it updates right away. And then here you see the difference, like Apple didn't change that much if you start at 0, right? And then here for the year, we can also leave out the year. It should still work. See, it now renders all the years starting at 2019 and 2024. And also note how quick everything is, right? Like MSFT, save, and there's the new data getting drawn inside of the chart. So that's the vanilla JavaScript solution. So next, we need to add the drop-down boxes, right? So from here, we need to first change the layout again. So instead of keeping it like this, let me make it a little bit smaller, just a little bit smaller, like so. Also note that the chart does not rescale right now. It is rendered at a certain size, and if you make it smaller, it doesn't get bigger again. That is something that is the canvas object that we use. However, Chart.js has a responsive render mode that you can also enable. I wanted to not make it too complicated, and that's the reason why it's not getting used. Okay, I just want to make sure it is definitely possible, so you don't have to refresh it to have it like on the right proportions all the time. There is a setting that you can use that. And with that, now we have to change the layout to add our years and also the symbol. And what we do is we start with the years, here the years, and then the symbol. And the easiest way to do that here on the first row, I'm going to add another div, and I'm going to give it 3 columns. I'm going to make it flex. You can enable flex in Bootstrap with a gap of 2 between the elements inside of the flex group, and then align items center. Good. Tab. Perfect. And in there, I want to have strong years, like so. And the next element is a select element. See, Copilot already makes a suggestion. Pretty good, but not what I want. I want it to be select. And then the class is supposed to be form select. That's Bootstrap. And the ID that I want is supposed to be select here, tab. And the name, I don't have a name for this, so I'm going to get rid of that. Select, that's like it is. The only thing I want to add is one option. So if I save this right now, I have this with an empty list. There's nothing in there. So I need to add an option, and the option is going to be with a value of 0. That means all of them, right? So here we go, and we're going to write all years. Perfect. See, now I have all, nothing else. However, we have the ID of this element, so we can add to it. And now we do the very same thing for the symbol, and I'm just going to copy paste it because it's literally the same thing. If we go to the end div here, we're going to create a second of it, save, and that's like symbol. But in this case, we don't have anything in the list because we don't have any symbol that is a default. So select symbol and select year are our 2 select tags that we need to add to. That's exactly what we can address in our script in the show chart, or in a different method I should say. So instead of that, I'm going to create a method that we call async function, and I'm going to say update selections. These are select elements, so that's why I called it update selections. And then the first thing is the years. I'm going to say years response equals await fetch, and I'm going to fetch from, and this is something I can copy paste again here, stock service at this point, and then fetch from stock service years. Perfect. And that's that. And then same thing, years JSON equals await years response JSON. And then the years, this is a little bit tricky, so I have to say const years is years JSON dot value, because they're not directly inside of the tag, they're inside of the value tag. I show you that in a second if I call this. So instead of show chart, I'm going to call update selections right here. Poof. So in here in the console, or I should say in the network tab, I should see the call to the backend now, update select, oh, sorry, I forgot the braces here, boom. So now here you see that in our years call, the response is value and then the years. So here I have to say my years are years JSON, and then we have to read the value. So now years is an array of integer numbers. And you see, I don't have any types here. It could be any type whatsoever. It's any response. That's something they can get from the method call. But most of the time, I don't know what kind of types I'm working with. So it's not that comfortable as working with Object Pascal. So with that, now we need to add these to the selections, right? That's what we need to do. And that's pretty easy because we can get we can say const year select, get element by ID, and it's not year select. As Copilot, it's select year. So we have the element by ID, and then we can say years, because years contains, and then we can literally say for each year. This is perfect. The option is we create an option element, and then option text equals year, and then we also do option dot value equals year, because the associated value should also be. And then we can say year select, add, I always do append child option. That's what I do. So now if we save this and click here, we already have the years inside of our combo box, so to speak, because let me rephrase this. Year select finds the select year tag. It finds this tag here. And this has a list of option tags. So for each year, years.forEach, for each year, that's year is an integer each time. I'm going to create an option element. I'm going to set the option text to year. I'm going to set the option value to year. And then I'm going to say year select, which is this. I'm going to add another option tag as a child, and this option tag is this. And I'm going to iterate that for all the elements I have in my years, and that completes the list. Now I do exactly the same thing. You probably could write this in a more generic way. I agree. I do the same thing for the symbols. I'm literally going to copy paste that instead of typing that. So here, paste, symbol response, and then here the symbol select, copy, onto here, paste. And just the same way, the stock service, I've got to take the stocks out, poof, save. And then the thing just the same, I have to use the value tag. And the difference here is, if you look at the response, I mean, it works already, as you can see here. The difference is, we go to the network tab. The difference is, if we run this again, that the response that comes back for the symbols are objects, right? We didn't use a list of integer as a return value. We used an object or a symbol object. And then here we have value. So we once again need to set the symbol JSON.value. That's our symbol. So that is our array here. However, the text is symbol.name each time, and not just the symbol itself, because the symbol is an object that has a property. Perfect. And with that, right here, I have my years and I have my symbol. And it gets nicer if we basically pull a little bit here like this size, then we get the full size. I didn't make it responsive or anything. I didn't implement different classes for different screen sizes. You can add that yourself. So the final piece to the puzzle is a button that we need in order to draw the chart, right? So we add a button here. Again, same row here. So this is the row. And then here we add another button on the same level button. So we have a button here. But of course, oh, no, it already works because I linked it to show chart, as you can see here. That's not what I want to do. I basically, or yes, I can keep it to show chart. And again, what I do here is I reserve 4 columns with an offset of 2. So these are the 2 empty. And then I say justify content. And the reason why that works is I make my button 100% of the width of those 4 columns, and then I justify it at the end. So perfectly positioned at the end of the grid, just so you know what's going on. And the button tag gets button success. That's Bootstrap basically saying the green color is the one that I want. And on click, show chart, that's where I call my method right now, the show chart method. The only thing I need to take care of now is I right now have hard-coded MSFT. And so this has to be plus symbol, the symbol that I find out. And then, of course, I have to do and the year. And see, like this, and year. So I need to get symbol and year. I can get those. Copilot does it for me. So I say the symbol is this. The symbol is document get element by ID, select symbol, and then the selected value. And then with regards to the year, same thing, select year and the selected value. So now if I have all years for Apple, I get all the years for Apple. And if I just select, for example, 2024, I update the chart, I just get 2024, 2023, and now let's go over to NVIDIA 2023, or all of them, showing chart. Perfect, it works. So this is the application that we wanted, and the key thing is, which is amazing in my opinion, that the XData server sends the definition for the whole chart. You don't need to do anything manually. It's just, you can control the appearance of the chart. You can just have your web application send the parameters for your chart, for like the year or the symbol. You could also ask for different charts. You can have different endpoints for different charts, but this is just supposed to be an introduction. So next, in the final part of this tutorial, we're going to create this JavaScript mess with TMS Web Core using Object Pascal, so that in 6 months from now, we still know what the code is, what the data types are, so that we have compilation, that we have that we don't just notice errors at runtime, that we notice errors at compile time. That is our aim for the final piece of the puzzle. See you then. Bye-bye.